Hello everyone, I'm back and we're still reading Rosie, Revere and the Raucous Riveters. I thought I'd tell you something. I'm actually reading this from a quarantine hotel in New Zealand. So if you know me, you know that I live in Singapore and I teach in Singapore and I am from New Zealand, so I'm coming home. So when I'm reading this book, I'm actually reading it from my quarantine where we have to spend 2 weeks in a hotel. But I have a lovely hotel and it's winter in New Zealand, but look at that. Beautiful and sunny outside. But I wanted to show you something I made this morning out of flax. So look at this. I made some flowers. Each one's a separate flower. Look at that. Okay, and you weave them. And they smell delicious too. So I made myself my own flowers, like Rosie and Iggy and Ada Twist would do. They are very resourceful and they don't give up, do they? They try and do things even if they don't have what they need. I didn't have any flowers, but I found out how to make these. That was fun. Okay, we're up to chapter 15. Rosie set up the paint-a-palooza and helped June into the gloves. "Are you okay?" asked Rosie. "They're weird, but okay," said June. "I'm ready to paint." June stood in front of the blank canvas. "This is the exciting part. I love brainstorming." Remember storming all the ideas in your brain and usually putting them down on paper. In her case, she might be painting. "Me too," said Rosie. June stepped on the foot pump. Rosie, Ada, Iggy watched nervously. The Raucous Riveters held their breath. Pump, pump, pump. Nothing happened. Pump, pump, pump. Nothing. Pump, pump. Oh, let's see what happened. Rosie's heart sunk. Pump. Suddenly, paint snaked through the tubes. The paint-a-palooza worked. See the tubes? See, she's got a foot pump here. Some of you might have had one of those to pump up an airbed or something. And hopefully the paint's going to go up through here and shoot out the paintbrushes. Let's see. Suddenly, paint snaked through the tubes. The paint-a-palooza had worked. The riveters cheered and clapped. June gently tapped the red button with her shoe. A glob of red paint squirted onto the red paintbrush. She made a smooth, even stroke on the canvas. June pushed the blue button and a glob of blue paint squeezed onto the blue brush. She dabbed it onto the canvas and began to paint. The paint-a-palooza was working beautifully. June was smiling. See the paintbrushes? And then she wasn't. What? Chapter 16. Oh. "Ouch!" she cried. "What happened?" said Rosie. "My arm is sore," said June. She reached up again. "Ow! Oh, maybe I should rest." "Oh dear, my arms are too weak," she said after a few minutes. Rosie's heart sunk. June smiled kindly at her. "Rosie, I want you to finish the painting." Rosie shook her head. If anyone but June painted, it wouldn't count in the competition. "Rosie," said June softly, "I want you to paint, truly." Rosie looked at June's face and knew that she meant it. "I'm sorry it was too heavy," said Rosie. "The paint-a-palooza was perfect," said June. "I will use it to paint my kitchen when my arms are stronger." She laughed out loud and Rosie smiled. Rosie tightened her headscarf. Remember the headscarf? That shows she's also part of the Raucous Riveters gang or team. Rosie tightened her headscarf. She picked up the left glove and boom! An idea hit Rosie's brain like thunder. And what an idea! She took off the paint glove and handed it to Aunt Rose. "Don't let anyone touch the canvas," said Rosie. "I'll be back." And with that, Rosie ran down the street and she was gone. She's got Gizmo following her. Oh, she's drawn another diagram for you. She's done it in pencil. She's done it on her science notebook because it's got squares on it. And she's put some labels in there for you. I see light, heavy, and not heavy. Rosie ran down Milk Lane, past Wells Drive to Rain Street with Gizmo zooming behind her. She stopped to catch her breath, then went to Mrs. Lou's house. Mrs. Lou was at the beginning of the story, remember? She had to come out in this story again. They wouldn't put a character at the beginning of the story and not introduce her later on. So here we go. Now we're finding out why Mrs. Lou is one of the characters in this story. Rosie climbed the porch steps. Then she took another deep breath. She was nervous. She knew how to help June, but she needed Mrs. Lou's help. What if Mrs. Lou said no? Rosie wished she was back at the library with Ada, Iggy, and the Riveters. She almost turned around to leave, but then she thought about June. She had promised to do her part. You can do it, Rosie said to herself. Gizmo perched on Rosie's shoulder and chirped. I don't know what's happening. I wonder if you have any predictions. I don't know why she's at Mrs. Lou's house. Gizmo perched on Rosie's shoulder and chirped. I know, said Rosie, and she rang the doorbell. Rosie waited. No answer. She waited again, rang the doorbell. Still no answer. She knocked loudly. Hello, Mrs. Lou, she called out. Silence. Rosie's heart sank again. She turned away from the door. But suddenly, Gizmo flew in front of her. She flapped her wings furiously and looped the loop, blocking Rosie's way so Rosie couldn't walk away. What's wrong? Said Rosie. Chip, 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 chip. Stop it, Gizmo, said Rosie. Chip, 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 chip. Crackle. Rosie heard a strange sound behind her. Crackle. Hello, said a faint, scratchy voice. It came from a box in the corner of the porch. Rosie looked at the box. Hello, she said. A metal purple goose looked back at her with googly eyes. Crackle! Stay there, said the scratchy voice, and it came from the metal goose. Rosie leaned in closer. That's curious. Just then the door opened and Mrs. Lou stepped outside. She held a strange walkie-talkie handset. Have you ever used one of those? Where you talk in it and your friends can hear it somewhere else. Oh, sorry, she said, my goosey talkie is not working so well. She pushed a button on the back of the goose. She clicked a button on her handset. The goose's beak snapped open. Crackle! Hello, hello! Mrs. Lou spoke into her handset and her voice came out of the goose's mouth. That's more like it. Ah, so she can be inside, speak into her little handset, and it comes out of the box outside the front of her house. Hello, Rosie, she said. Glad to see you. Rosie was shocked. Mrs. Lou was so friendly. Rosie thought how Mrs. Lou had shut the curtains on her and how she sneaked like a shadow in the garden. Rosie looked at her neighbour and felt more nervous than ever. She said, oh, she was stuttering. Yes, asked Mrs. Lou. Rosie took another deep breath and remembered why she was there. I need your help, she said, and Mrs. Lou smiled. I thought you would never ask. That's interesting. Mrs. Rosie had the wrong idea of Mrs. Lou. She thought she wasn't nice, but it sounds as if she's quite lovely. I wonder what Rosie is going to ask Mrs. Lou for help. I wonder why. I don't know. Maybe you can have some predictions now. Share some predictions with your friends.